The bald-bunkered dictator reminisces about World War II, as they call World War II, and, of course, crawls at everyone's feet to hammer out an armistice and protect his bald head as well as his friend Xi Jinping. Meanwhile, Shoigu declares, "We will beat all military that will appear, not from Ukraine, on Ukrainian territory," referring to foreign mercenaries. And Putin seems to be willing to make concessions anyway. We'll talk about that live on YouTube 24. My name is Iryna Uzlova, and with you is Sergei Aslanyan, host of Khordorkovsky Live, our fellow journalist. Sergei, hello, good to see you. And for the second day in a row, there is a certain event, including drone performances, called Knowledge First in Russia. It is strange to give a name to an event in a country that is already last in everything. Yesterday, we watched the joy of Medvedev, dressed up in a Stalinist image with a Colorado ribbon. Strange that he didn't put it on his forehead. Today, Putin is sitting there, not standing there, like Medvedev, although no one has been standing there for a long time. And now the Russian dictator recalls how his grandfather wrote a letter in the war. Grandfather was a countryman. He wrote with mistakes, but he addressed his son as you. In the letter, he tells how his wife died in his arms from a bullet in the stomach. She realizes that she is dying and says, "Do not cry, do not upset me," dying, thinking of him. At the end, the conclusion is, "Beat the creeps," Putin was quoted as saying. Speaking at the marathon Knowledge First, Putin emphasized the importance of passing true history through a generation. Said the author of Rewritten Histories and the lover to tell about Rhetorics and Vladimir. Sergei, how much it all looks cheap and unnatural, even for them. And why Putin is so afraid that on May 9th, unknown drones will come to him to visit and spoil his victory. At Valdai in 2007, an important idea was voiced by Minister of Education Fursenko, a friend of the Ozero Cooperative. At that time, as a minister, he said that we should stop educating a man creator and raise a man consumer. From that moment on, the whole royal family took up the task in earnest. Most likely, they think that they have already achieved their goals, and now they should use the result. The primitive balaganza they are engaged in now is designed for people who perceive the picture as flat, believe the slogans, and watch TV. That is, for those who have no critical thinking, no knowledge, and of course, whose history textbooks have been rewritten by Medinsky. We see them trying to dress up in Stalin-era tunics before May 9th.
В принципе, ни критического мышления, ни каких бы то ни было знаний, и уж, конечно, учебники истории у них точно переписаны Мединским. Потому что мы видим, что сейчас, перед 9 мая, стараются переодеться в кителя сталинские.
Yesterday, they urgently renamed a part of Volgograd as the airport. Stalingrad, I noticed that too. What's the point? In general, we see that everything that is happening in Russia now is an explanation with the population. Look how grandiose we are, worthy of the great victory in Stalinists. This is very important because this game could have been played in many different ways. You could put on Lenin's cap and perform an acrobatic etude on an armored car. You could revive Stalin, return the name Stalingrad to everyday life. And one could do none of this. But it is important for these people to be Stalinists. It is important to emphasize that they are the ones whose hands took over the baton from Stalin, and now they are absolutely worthy of it. Every May 9th in Russia, even now, when the country has been concretized, the opposition has been removed, and people with critical thinking have been dispersed. A question arises that began as a postulate of perestroika. After all, not everyone in perestroika wanted democracy. Not everyone wanted a different country, but everyone wanted sausage zhiguli. And then there was glasnost, and they wanted information. Not the truth, but they wanted to understand.
Но все хотели колбасы, все хотели «Жигули», а еще тогда ведь появилось явление гласность, и очень хотелось информации, очень хотелось не то чтобы правды, запроса на правду в России не было никогда, но хотелось кое в чем разобраться.
Every time the question arises, how many died in the Great Patriotic War? Open the archives. Then there was Volkov, a general, who promised that if he became a deputy, he would open the archives and tell the truth, the terrible, classified forever, about the number of dead. Naturally, he did not do this, but he became a deputy. Now the situation is the same. The greatness of the people, which Peskov, it seems, was going to eat the earth, as he himself stated. Well, let him. Victory. And here we are in one row wearing Stalin's tunic. And Medvedev is also a Stalinist. But let's approach it from the other end. Don't play a play called "We Are Involved." Complete the process. Open the archives. How many people died in this war? You, under the shadow of Stalin, with the Generalissimo, how many died in that war? And in the concentration camps? How many prisoners did you hand over for torture? And how many were shot after the Yalta Conference?
Так сколько вы вместе с генералиссимусом погубили на той войне людей? А в концлагерях? А сколько пленных вы посчитали нужным сдать на растерзание? А сколько потом расстреляли пленных, полученных по итогам Ялтинской конференции?
Where are the numbers? Where is the data? When we see Putin, Medvedev, and the whole royal throng with Stalinists claiming to be involved in greatness and victory, they are not. When you say you are Stalinist, you are complicit in war, murder, and crime. Yes, you are. When you attacked Ukraine, you became criminals. But the victory ceremony on May 9th never reveals this terrible secret. How many people you Stalinists killed? The main thing that the Soviet Union has always concealed, and continues to conceal. It started the Great Patriotic War together with Hitler, with whom it was allied. Yes, it is not two wars, the Great Patriotic War and World War II. It's one war that the Soviet Union started with Hitler. And now they are trying to portray it as an autonomous victory in a separate war, when they started fighting War II and then successfully won war, ending War II.
И это не две войны, Великая Отечественная и Вторая мировая. Это одна война, Вторая мировая, которую развязал Советский Союз со своим союзником Гитлером, с гитлеровской Германией. И сейчас, когда они пытаются сделать вид, что это какая-то автономная победа в другой войне, то есть начинали воевать во Вторую мировую, потом воевали и успешно победили в Великой Отечественной, в результате которой Вторая мировая закончилась.
We are Stalinists, and now there is an official Stalingrad on the map. So far, it is only an airport, against, by the way, the will of the inhabitants of Stalingrad, who were mostly against it, 3/4. And here we are, the successors of Stalin, but in fact, you are the successors not of the victory, but of the crime. If you want to redeem your guilt, start by opening the archives and tell us how many died, how many did you kill, how many casualties. And don't divide it into two wars, the Great Patriotic War and World War II. This is one war that you started. In Russia, they celebrate, they pour, they snack on finely chopped food. But celebrating in Russia never involves knowing the point. No one knows what is celebrated on March 8th. Well, it seems to be something with women. No one understands where the holiday February 23rd came from. Well, it seems to be for men. And no one knows what November 7th was, and why November 4th is now celebrated in honor of November 7th. A parade and something on Red Square. And nobody knows about May 9th, because the war, first of all, ended on May 8th. And secondly, it was World War II, which was started by the Soviet Union.
И по поводу 9 мая никто на всякий случай не знает, что война, во-первых, закончилась 8 мая, во-вторых, это была Вторая мировая, которую начал Советский Союз.
The situation remains unchanged, and even with a regime change, the true number of victims Putin has sacrificed for his imperial ambitions may never be revealed. These ambitions are no different, despite his repeated claims that Nazism must be defeated. He says both Medvedev and Peskov, and they declare, "We are for a truce, we are for peace." Yet the goals of the NWO remain the same. Dmitry Peskov, Putin's ally, reiterates this today. Let's listen to him and discuss their real objectives, which come at the cost of countless lives. Is it preferable to achieve those goals peacefully, Yes. And initially, the president tried to achieve these goals peacefully. We know the draft documents that he proposed to the Europeans and Americans before the special military operation. And we all remember how all the president's initiatives were rejected. After that, there was nothing left but to solve the problems militarily through a special military operation. Now, the president remains open to diplomatic methods of conflict resolution.
Сейчас президент остается открытым для политико-дипломатических методов урегулирования этого конфликта.
President Putin said he supports the initiative to establish a ceasefire, but before that, a number of questions need to be answered, and a few nuances that he listed need to be resolved. That kind of bipolarity. And Sergei, the fact that the goals of the SWO are unchanged, we've noticed. I noticed Dnipro, Kharkiv, Kiev, Poltava, Kropivnitsky, Pavlograd. All this is felt by border towns, settlements of Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions. Occupied Donetsk, Luhansk, parts of Kherson and Zaporozhye also see this Russian peace, which they do not really need. Their goal is to conquer the whole world. Donald Trump, though separated by an ocean, is starting to feel something too. In a CNN interview, timed to coincide with the 100 days, he said that perhaps Putin is tricking him. Basically, he believes he wants to end the war, but trust remains inconclusive. Sergei, we understand that, we feel that. But when will Trump realize for sure that Putin can no longer deceive, and will he be ready to take some steps? Because words, frankly, are already tiring.
Сергей, ну вот мы понимаем это, мы чувствуем это. А вот Дональд Трамп, когда уже точно почувствует, что Путину мир не надо, и готов ли он на какие-то шаги идти, потому что слова уже, ну, честно говоря, утомили.
In Trump's case, we see that aging often begins with a breakdown of neural connections in the brain, and senile dementia turns once strong, intelligent, and dignified people into helpless old men who will be scammed by any boy in the sandbox. We are faced with the usual telephone fraud, which has become the practice of the day. Serious people with experience are divorced for money in just 1 or 2 calls. It would seem that the older generation should be wise, but old age is ruthless. Trump has gotten to the point where it's hard to believe. How so? An American president, especially against the backdrop that Biden, too, has a host of diagnoses and ailments.
Казалось бы, ну как же так? Вот это старшее поколение людей мудрых, людей повидавших. Ну нет, на самом деле мы видим, что старость настолько беспощадна. Трамп до такой степени идиот, до такой степени в глубокой стадии болезни, что это невозможно поверить. Ну как так? Ну американский президент, ну это же все-таки Америка. Тем более мы видим до этого, что Байден тоже очень с большим количеством диагнозов, совершенно нескончаемым списком недомоганий.
Nevertheless, everyone pointed the finger at him, saying that he was talking to shadows, confusing day with night. In fact, he was intellectually more accomplished. Trump said that Putin didn't conquer all of Ukraine just because of his respect for me, for Trump. If this had been said by a grandfather in a sandbox, everyone would have laughed and said, "You need to change your medication. Talk to your doctor, because Grandpa, alas, has become quite the fool." And here we realize that this is idiotic, and it is absolutely impossible to accept it. The American president says such things, and in negotiations with Russia, his special envoy wipes it off like a rag every time he is in Russia. After that, Trump's views change, like a grandfather whose favorite grandchild brought him to the sandbox and said, "Grandpa, let's go make sand dolls." Grandpa goes because it's a good grandchild, gives him candy, and then the grandchild says, "No, Grandpa, let's tie bows for the dolls."
И дедуля с ним идет, играет, потому что это хороший внучок, он ему конфетку. А потом внучка подходит и говорит: "Не, дедуль, пойдем со мной бантики куклам завязывать."
He says, "Come on, granddaughter, I'll give you a candy because you are my favorite granddaughter." And the one from the sandbox is already forgotten. Then he calls from the sandbox, "Grandpa, I'm waiting for you." And he answers, "Yes, indeed, grandson." That's how Trump is. He's seriously talking about what? After all, the facts say that in these 3 months, in the proverbial 100 days, why did the American president suddenly start measuring with a Russian ruler? It's the Russian measure of time. 100 days to order, shock therapy, 500 days that will shake the economy. Why did he start using this tool? Yet we see that nothing has changed. If he had critical thinking, if instead of senile marasmus and narcissism, he had tried to analyze, he could have remembered that the subject of discussion is far from today. This seems to be what Trump is constantly talking about with his advisors and the Russian delegation and his special envoys. But the war has not gotten any shorter. It continues. Trump, like a grandchild in a sandbox, said, "Let's make sand pits." And he is making them. At this point, he forgets he has a granddaughter. The sand pits are not the first time. In these 100 days, a lot has been said about peace. A lot of people have flown in, and a lot of things have been claimed to be our terms. But the main thing has not changed. The war hasn't stopped for a second. Trump, for some reason, says Putin is a good guy who may be making mistakes, but nothing has really changed. Putin was going to war, is at war, and will continue. He wasn't going to make a truce or make any kind of deal. And in these 100 days, he has proven it. Putin has a cadre of people who, if necessary, will come to the talks, make demands, and prolong the discussions.
Путин собирался воевать, Путин воюет, Путин будет воевать. Путин не собирался ни с кем никакого перемирия заключать, никаких сделок, и не будет этого делать. И за 100 дней он точно это доказал. И у Путина прекрасный штат людей, которые, если надо, приедут на переговоры, выдвинут какие-нибудь требования, и любой вопрос замотают в обсуждениях.
The facts are that the war continues. And Trump here is a helpless old man who sits on a rubble pile and remembers the past. Earlier, there was a referendum in the ring, an American president who evaluated facts, not words. The same thing is happening now. Last week he spoke to Putin, and the week before that he spoke to Putin as well. Again, talking about peace and the ceasefire that seems to have been Easter. Really, nothing happened, and it's repeating as it always does. Every time, if Trump is willing to believe another wrapper, he thinks it's candy, but it's really nothing. He doesn't notice that it's a wrapper, and there is no candy. The only thing he hasn't forgotten is his reflection in the mirror, where his megalomania shines through. Putin is driven by respect for Trump, and because of that, Ukraine has not been fully conquered. That's all that the American president represents at the moment.
Нет, опять пустышка, не конфета. Ну вот это точно конфета. Нет, это внучок все съел, там ничего нет, это обертка. Ну вот там-то точно конфета. Это говорит о том, что при этом он единственное, что не забыл, это посмотреть в зеркало. А там сияет его мания величия. Потому что у Путина, у него из уважения к Трампу сработал механизм, остановивший полное завоевание Украины. Потому что так бы, конечно, Путин бы давно бы ее всю уже завоевал. Но из уважения к Трампу не смог. Вот все, что из себя на сегодняшний день представляет президент Соединенных Штатов Америки.
Yes, Sergei, of course these dances are good, but idiotism is really evident. We do not make diagnoses, but we see by actions, or rather inactions, what is happening. So, lowering himself in front of Putin is no longer just Trump's personal behavior. He represents a superpower. At least that's how it was before his return. These 100 days with not much to brag about, an hour-and-a-half speech. I was talking to coworkers and friends last night. Geez, maybe I should stay up because he's going to give a whole 5 hours? I mean, he likes to talk, even though his vocabulary is always repetitive. However, it was only an hour and a half with dancing and applause. It is clear that he has nothing to boast about. But it is not only Putin who can take advantage of this. Leaders like Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, and even in Iran are watching all this, realizing that Trump's victory is gone and their hands are untied.
В том же Иране и понимают, что ни на каком поприще как-то победу Трампа нет, и руки у них развязываются.
After all, he ultimatumed Hamas in the Gaza Strip to release all the hostages immediately, threatening terrible retaliation. But they just laughed and did nothing. Nothing changed in Gaza. No one released the hostages, no peace processes or negotiations began, and certainly no Trump Plaza or life-size monument to him was built. Despite all this, the enemy turned out to be very insidious, dangerous, and vindictive. They looked at Trump's ultimatum, who, by the way, has 2 aircraft carriers, controls the Red Sea, and is a serious threat in the region. He is helping Israel, but the ultimatum seems to have had no effect.